This show is part of OnePlace, a daily network of focused briefings across the stories people follow most.
Welcome to today's briefing. We are diving into a busy Tuesday at the White House, covering everything from major executive orders on voting to legal setbacks for the president's ambitious construction plans.
Trump signs order creating a national list of voters.
A judge halts construction on the White House Ballroom.
Hegseth demands allies secure the vital Strait of Hormuz.
The Supreme Court prepares to hear Birthright citizenship arguments.
Trump suggests U.S. forces will leave Iran very soon.
Army pilots are reinstated after hovering near Kid Rock.
Trump plans to attend the Supreme Court citizenship hearing.
Hegseth overrides the Army to clear Kid Rock pilots.
A judge rules the White House Ballroom needs approval.
Americans face $4 gas as the Iran war continues.
First up,
President Trump has signed a sweeping executive order that aims to create a nationwide list of verified eligible voters, while placing new restrictions on mail-in voting. This move is framed by the administration as a necessary step to ensure election integrity, but it has immediately triggered a firestorm of legal threats from state officials. The order directs the Department of Homeland Security and the Social Security Administration to compile these lists, effectively attempting to centralize a process that has historically been managed by individual states. Critics argue this is a direct violation of the Constitution's delegation of election powers to the states.
The pushback was almost instantaneous, particularly from states like Oregon and Arizona that rely heavily on mail-in ballots. Oregon's Secretary of State, Tobias Reed, has already pledged to see the president in court, arguing that Washington, D.C. should not be issuing decrees over state-run systems. Meanwhile, Arizona's Adrian Fontes pointed out that their secure mail-in system was actually designed by Republicans and is used by 80% of their voters. Trump continues to claim that mail-in fraud is legendary, despite numerous audits and court cases finding no evidence of widespread issues. This sets up a massive legal showdown just before the midterm elections.
Next,
a federal judge has ordered the Trump administration to immediately halt construction on the $400 million White House Ballroom project. U.S. District Judge Richard Leon issued a preliminary injunction, siding with a preservationist group that argued the administration demolished the East Wing without proper congressional approval. Judge Leon was quite blunt in his ruling, stating that while the president is the steward of the White House for future generations, he is certainly not the owner. This ruling represents a significant legal roadblock for one of the most dramatic structural changes to the executive mansion in decades, as the East Wing has already been torn down to make space.
The administration has already filed a notice of appeal, but for now, the crews must stop their work. This project has been controversial from the start, not just because of the historic demolition, but because of the sheer scale of the proposed addition. The National Trust for Historic Preservation, which brought the suit, is celebrating this as a win for the American people, insisting that such a permanent change to an iconic landmark requires independent reviews and explicit authorization from Congress. The judge's decision came just days before a planning commission was expected to give its own approval, throwing the entire timeline of the ballroom into total uncertainty.
Moving on,
Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth is echoing President Trump's recent demands for U.S. allies to take over the responsibility of securing the Strait of Hormuz. This critical waterway has been effectively closed by Iran following U.S. and Israeli strikes in late February, causing a massive disruption in global oil shipping. Trump took to social media to tell other nations to go get their own oil, suggesting that the United States will no longer provide protection for countries that didn't support recent military actions. Hegseth reinforced this during a press conference, stating that the U.S. has already set the conditions for success, and it is now up to others to step up.
This shift in policy is causing significant anxiety among international partners, especially as Trump specifically called out the United Kingdom. He suggested that if they need jet fuel, they should find the courage to go to the strait and take it themselves. This rhetoric marks a potential history-defining shift in American alliances, moving away from the traditional role of guaranteeing freedom of navigation in the region. While reports suggest Trump might be willing to end the military campaign against Iran even if the strait remains closed, the pressure is now squarely on European and NATO allies to decide if they will intervene militarily or face continued energy shortages.
Now to...
The U.S. Supreme Court is set to hear oral arguments tomorrow in a case that could fundamentally redefine American citizenship. The case, known as Trump versus Barbara, challenges an executive order that seeks to end birthright citizenship for children born to parents who are in the country illegally or on temporary visas. This principle has been a cornerstone of American law since 1898, ensuring that almost anyone born on U.S. soil is a citizen. The administration argues that the 14th Amendment was originally intended only for formerly enslaved people and shouldn't apply to the children of immigrants, a theory that most legal historians and scholars have long considered to be outside the mainstream.
If the Supreme Court sides with the administration, it could create a class of millions of stateless people within the United States. Lower courts have already struck down the order, finding it unconstitutional, but the administration is pushing for a definitive ruling from the High Court. This case is being watched closely because it touches on the very core of national identity. Legal experts warn that overturning such a long-standing precedent would have ripple effects across the entire immigration system. A decision is expected by early summer, and the outcome will likely depend on how the conservative majority interprets the specific jurisdiction clause of the 14th Amendment during tomorrow's high-stakes session.
Next,
President Trump has hinted that U.S. military action in Iran could be coming to an end much sooner than expected, suggesting a timeline of just 2 to 3 weeks. These comments were made in the context of rising domestic pressure over gas prices, which have recently hit a national average of $4 a gallon. Trump claimed that leaving Iran would cause those prices to come tumbling down. This represents a notable shift from his previous threats to obliterate Iranian infrastructure if the Strait of Hormuz wasn't reopened immediately. The White House has announced that the president will address the nation tomorrow night at 9 p.m. to provide a more formal update on the war.
While the president talks about withdrawal, the situation on the ground remains volatile. An American freelance journalist, Shelley Kittleson, was reportedly kidnapped in Baghdad, and U.S. officials are currently working with Iraqi security forces to secure her release. Additionally, Trump's comments about the Strait of Hormuz suggest he is comfortable letting other countries fend for themselves in those waters, once U.S. troops depart. This hands-off approach to the shipping lanes contrasts sharply with his earlier aggressive stance. As the nation waits for his Wednesday night speech, the focus remains on whether a diplomatic deal is actually within reach or if the U.S. is simply preparing to walk away from the conflict.
Then,
Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth has personally intervened to lift the suspension of 2 Army pilots who hovered their Apache helicopters near the home of musician Kid Rock. The pilots were initially grounded by the Army pending an investigation into whether the flight violated safety protocols or FAA regulations. Kid Rock, a vocal supporter of the president, had posted videos of the helicopters hovering by his pool while he saluted and cheered. Hegseth took to social media to declare there would be no punishment and no investigation, telling the pilots to carry on as patriots. This move effectively shut down the Army's standard review process for unauthorized or unsafe flight operations.
the incident has sparked a debate about military discipline and political influence. While the Army spokesperson initially emphasized the importance of holding personnel accountable to aviation standards, the Pentagon's deputy press secretary later said there was nothing to add to Hegseth's post. Kid Rock himself mentioned that he has a friendly relationship with pilots from nearby Fort Campbell, and has even hosted Vice President J.D. Vance. President Trump weighed in from the Oval Office, suggesting that while the pilots probably shouldn't have been playing games, he likes Kid Rock and understands the sentiment. The quick reinstatement highlights a tension between traditional military oversight and the current administration's more informal leadership style.
Next up,
In an unprecedented move, President Trump plans to attend tomorrow's Supreme Court hearing on birthright citizenship in person. This would make him the first sitting president to ever attend oral arguments at the nation's highest court. The official White House schedule confirms the stop, where the justices will hear the administration's appeal regarding the executive order signed on his first day of his second term. Trump has previously considered attending hearings, such as those regarding his trade tariffs, but ultimately stayed away to avoid being a distraction. This time, however, he seems determined to be present, telling reporters in the Oval Office that he believes he will definitely be there to listen.
Trump's presence in the courtroom adds a layer of political drama to an already monumental legal case. He has been vocal about his views on the court, describing it in partisan terms and noting that he likes some justices while disliking others. Having appointed 3 of the current justices himself, his attendance is seen by some as a way to underscore the importance of this immigration crackdown to his administration's agenda. While other presidents, like Richard Nixon and William Howard Taft, have had direct dealings with the court, none have sat in on arguments while holding office. This move further blurs the lines between the executive and judicial branches during a critical constitutional debate.
Now to...
The story of the helicopter pilots at Kid Rock's Tennessee estate took another turn as more details emerged about the brief suspension. The Army had confirmed that the two AH-64 Apaches were from the 101st Combat Aviation Brigade and were conducting a flight in the Nashville area. The initial suspension was described as a discretionary step to ensure that all safety protocols were followed, especially after Kid Rock posted footage of the aircraft hovering very close to a swimming pool. However, Defense Secretary Hegseth's social media post arrived less than 3 hours after the Army's official statement, abruptly ending the inquiry before it could even really begin.
Kid Rock, whose real name is Robert Ritchie, has defended the pilots, saying they are always welcome to cruise by his house. He noted his long history of performing for troops and his recent interactions with high-level officials at Fort Campbell. President Trump even joked that the pilots might have been trying to defend the musician. Despite the lighthearted tone from the White House, the incident raises questions about the message being sent to the ranks regarding flight regulations. By overriding the Army's decision to investigate, Hegseth has signaled a shift in how the Pentagon handles high-profile incidents involving the president's most prominent and vocal public supporters.
Next,
the legal ruling against the White House ballroom construction is being characterized by its unusual tone and punctuation. Judge Richard Leon's 35-page opinion included several exclamation points, emphasizing his view that the project cannot proceed without a blessing from Congress. The judge noted that the American people benefit when branches of government stick to their prescribed roles. The lawsuit filed by the National Trust for Historic Preservation alleged that the White House skipped essential steps, including environmental assessments and filing plans with the National Capital Planning Commission. The project, which has grown in scope to accommodate over 1,300 guests, is now legally frozen for at least 14 days to allow for an appeal.
President Trump has disputed the idea that he needs congressional approval, arguing that the current White House facilities are simply inadequate for hosting world leaders. He specifically mentioned the upcoming visit of King Charles III as a reason why a modern, larger ballroom is necessary. The administration has defended the project as more economical than a simple renovation, but the demolition of the historic East Wing remains a major point of contention for preservationists. With the judge's ruling effectively halting the $400 million private-funded project, the administration must now decide whether to fight the ruling in the appellate courts or seek the very congressional authorization they have so far avoided.
Finally,
as the war in Iran enters its second month, the economic impact is being felt acutely by American drivers. Gas prices have officially topped the $4 mark for the first time in nearly 4 years, a direct result of the closure of the Strait of Hormuz. This waterway is one of the world's most vital oil shipping channels, and its disruption has sent global Brent crude prices soaring toward $120 a barrel. For many Americans, the conflict in the Middle East is no longer a distant news story, but a daily financial burden at the pump. The rapid rise in fuel costs is putting significant pressure on the administration to find a resolution.
The one-month rise in oil prices is on track to be the biggest on record, reflecting the deep uncertainty in the energy markets. While President Trump has suggested that leaving Iran will bring these prices down, the logistical reality of reopening the strait remains complex. Consumers are increasingly vocal about the struggle to keep up with these costs, and the political stakes are rising alongside the price per gallon. With the national average hitting that symbolic $4 threshold, the pressure for a strategic shift is mounting. Whether through military action by allies or a diplomatic breakthrough, the public is demanding that something be done to stabilize the energy market and provide relief.
That wraps up our briefing for today. Thank you for joining us for this update on the day's most critical stories. Be sure to follow the show for your next daily briefing.